And welcome once again to the Duct Tape Studios. I'm Jeff McAleer, your host here at the Gaming Gang channel. Thanks for joining me once again. All throughout the month of November, I'm aiming to bring you a brand new review each and every day. Now, that might mean a written review over at thegaminggang.com or a video review hosted by yours truly, which is obviously the case this time around. Today, I am going to share my review of the Tales of the Valiant Game Master's Guide from Kobold Press. This is written by a who's who of tabletop role-playing game luminaries, led by lead designer Celeste Konowich. This 304-page hardcover is available now, carries an MSRP of $59.99, or you can grab just the PDF alone over at DriveThruRPG for $34.99. All that said, let's swing on over to the other camera because I've got the Game Master's Guide for Tales of the Valiant. A couple of things to mention before we get stuck in. First of all, my friends over at Kobold Press were kind enough to provide me with this review copy, but neither I nor anyone else affiliated with the Gaming Gang has received any other sort of compensation for me to share this review with you. These days, it's important you know that. We're also not going to look at each and every page of the book, but I do want to give you a really good feel for what you're going to find inside this Game Master's Guide. All right, let's dive on in. First thing we're going to do is take a peek at the credits page, because we're a lot of folks who worked very hard to bring this to life. So let's give them credit where credit is due. It's important for me to mention that this book is not required in order to run Tales of the Valiant. The only two books you need are the Tales of the Valiant Player's Guide and Monster Vault. That's it. All this content is optional, but this is an absolutely fantastic toolkit for game masters, regardless of their experience level. So we're going to start off with a chapter that's devoted to becoming a game master. So, of course, this is aimed at people who have no experience in our hobby, but there's actually a lot of great content in here that is very useful for people out there like myself who've been running role-playing games for decades that maybe they've overlooked or forgotten or might be absolutely brand new to them. So just because this is aimed at people new to the hobby, as a game master, I certainly recommend read through this section. Don't ignore it. It's not a section that's tackling, well, what is a role-playing game? And then going through examples of play and things like that. No, not at all. Next up, we're going to start discussing adventures and campaigns, how to theme an adventure, what kind of genres of adventures you can look to create, how creating a campaign is going to be different for low-level characters as opposed to higher-level characters, how to start a campaign, how to continue a campaign, as well as how to bring a campaign to an end. Next up, we get into world building. And as I say all the time, one of my absolute favorite epic fantasy settings for role-playing games is Midgard from Kobold Press. So you're not going to have a lot of page space devoted to this section, but there are a lot of good things for game masters to focus on if they're looking to create a realistic and logical fantasy world. Of course, Tales of the Valiant does take place in what I consider to be a high fantasy or epic fantasy sort of setting, not a low fantasy or sword and sorcery kind of setting. So keep in mind that it is geared that way. But once again, a lot of really great information in here for you to look at just high level aspects of your game world and what you should be looking at focusing on, as opposed to getting really deep into the minutia of your game world that's never going to come into play at the game table. So I like this chapter quite a bit. Now, it's important to note that even though this Game Master's Guide is written for Tales of the Valiant, a great amount of content in here is easily applicable to 5e and 5.5e Dungeons and Dragons, as well as any sort of 5e adjacent fantasy role-playing game you might be running. So even if you're not running Tales of the Valiant, there is tons and tons of content in here that you can get use from, which adds a lot of value to this book. Now, as far as combat goes, I'm more theater of the mind as far as my approach to role playing games. So I would probably not incorporate a lot of the combat options that are here. But I know a lot of folks out there, they are really into a lot of crunch to their combat. And these options are going to be very, very welcome at their game tables. We're also going to get information about various different combat situations, combat terrain, and so forth. So, a lot of excellent variance in that chapter for those of you who want a bit extra crunch to their combat encounters. Next up, we're going to get into some advanced exploration, talking about various different environments, various different terrain, various different travel modes. A good amount of page space here is devoted to dungeons, dungeon delving, creating dungeons, how to put together a fairly logical dungeon ecology, which isn't always present in role playing game adventures, especially some of the old school adventures that are out there. It's more of a funhouse approach. We have loads of random tables throughout this book. And it's important to keep in mind that, yes, you can use those tables to randomly generate various different locations, encounters, NPCs, magic items, and so forth. But myself personally, I would use those random tables more as inspiration for me to pick and choose what I would like, as opposed to just simply rolling things up randomly. Another aspect of this chapter that I think is very important is kind of a focus on interactivity, because a lot of times, especially with more modern adventures, that kind of gets the short end of the stick. And something that I look to focus on in adventures is with the players being able to interact with the environment, as opposed to it's just, oh, you see this, there's a combat encounter, there's an NPC. I like to really kind of delve into giving players options. Even if that big shiny red button says do not push, the players want to push it and they want to find out what's going to happen when they push the cherry red button. So I like to do a lot of that. Probably one of my favorite chapters of this Game Master's Guide is this advanced social encounters section. Something I talk about all the time is, in my opinion, a make or break point for any sort of role playing game adventure is going to be the NPCs. If you create realistic, interesting NPCs that the players want their characters to interact with, you are going to find those adventures, those campaigns are going to be far, far more memorable than just tossing out any old NPCs that don't have motivations. It's far more important for a game master to focus on what motivates an NPC, even if we're just talking about a monster, even a mindless monster. What is its motivation? What is its drive? As opposed to, oh, well, this character has blue eyes and long blonde hair. Nobody cares about that. They care about how their interaction with that NPC is going to impact the story and the game world. So, very nicely done. Then we're also going to get into another section with some advanced options as far as environment and terrain and traps, creating magical items, creating magical potions, and providing new variants for gameplay, how to create new spells. Now, we're going to wrap up with a chapter that's really going to kind of delve even further into that, and that's going to be homebrewing. And as I say all the time, I am terrible at just creating things just out of nothing, pulling things out of thin air. Now, I can improvise with the best of them, but as far as just creating an adventure from scratch, no, I'm terrible at that. But I'll tell you what, this last chapter here has tons and tons of great content as far as those of you out there who love to create your own adventures and to create your own monsters and put together stat blocks. All that information's in here. We get plenty of content regarding how to reward your players with treasure. But I think the highlight probably to this chapter is the monster creation. And then we will have some examples of different monsters like the owl bear zombie as an example. That was kind of cool. So that is going to wrap up the book. We've got some appendices at the end here. We've got a lot of pages devoted to random encounters based on terrain. I thought that was really nicely done. We're also going to get some random tables as far as creating NPCs and giving them personality, dungeon dressing, and so forth. But I absolutely love the Appendix C, which is the inspiration. This is sort of the Appendix N of this Game Master's Guide. And I'll tell you what, it is far more robust than what you'd find in the Dungeon Master's Guide way back in the day for advanced D&D. Tons of great novels, loads of cool movies, TV shows, some advice on some nonfiction titles that, as a game master, you may want to take a peek at, such as some works by Joseph Campbell. Then we're going to finish up with our index. So that is a peek inside the Game Master's Guide for Tales of the Valiant. Swing on over to the other camera so I can share some final thoughts and give this a review score. Tell you what, this volume is chock full of useful information, useful content, great ideas that just about any fantasy role-playing game master can utilize. You don't have to be running Tales of the Valiant to get value out of this book. You don't have to be running Dungeons and Dragons to get value out of this book. There is great content within. Now, I'll be the first to point out, I didn't give the Tales of the Valiant Player's Guide a really high review score. In fact, off the top of my head, I think it's a 6.5. I liked it. I recommended it. I just didn't feel that it was vastly different than 5e Dungeons and Dragons. As far as review scores go, though, I'll be making up for it with my review score for the Game Master's Guide because I think this volume is fantastic. It is overflowing with useful content, great ideas. This is so well done. I'm not going to have an opportunity to review the new Dungeons and Dragons 2024 Dungeon Master's Guide, but to be honest, I really don't care because I can guarantee you it's not better than this. This book is an absolute must-have if you are running Tales of the Valiant, Dungeons and Dragons, or really any 5e adjacent fantasy role-playing game. So on a scale of 0 to 10, I give the Tales of the Valiant Game Master's Guide a 10 out of 10. It is that good. I enjoyed the hell out of it reading it, and I could certainly see myself utilizing tons of the content which is contained within the book. It's that good. All right, that's it for this time out. If you like the video, by all means, please give it a quick thumbs up. Subscribe to the Gaming Gang channel if you haven't already, and if you do subscribe, don't forget, ring that bell because it'll not only let you know when I share videos such as this review, it'll also inform you when my live stream, the Gaming Gang Dispatch, airs Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday evenings right here on YouTube at 7 p.m. Central. Of course, when you're not watching videos on the Gaming Gang channel, be sure to visit thegaminggang.com for all the latest in tabletop gaming news, reviews, and a whole lot more you're not going to find here on YouTube. You know the drill. Get your geek on at thegaminggang.com. Once again, I'm Jeff McAleer. Thank you very much for watching. Until I see you next time, I certainly hope all of you get to enjoy plenty of great gaming with your gang.